I think we're live. Hello, Renegades. Terry here from Renegade Game Studios. I'm going to be painting up some Clank miniatures. I asked on the Renegade social media page for Twitter and in the Clank Facebook group, which if you're a fan of Clank and you're not a member of that group, go ahead and look for it and join, because I think that's a great group to join if you want to share your enthusiasm for Clank. I am going to be painting up a couple of the characters that the groups voted on. So the Clank group voted overwhelmingly almost for Donar Blitzen for me to paint him up, and on Twitter, Kathris Straub was very popular. So we're gonna be trying to tackle the two of them simultaneously. I am a huge fan of painting miniatures in batches. I find that, especially when you're painting miniatures like this, where, say, one of them is drying and you're waiting to put on another layer or another coat, it's really useful to have something else to work on while you're at the table, because getting to the table can be a little challenging. So I'm really excited to be painting these miniatures up today. I've been staring at them for too long, and honestly, now's a great time to get into miniature painting if you're not already. If you're looking to enjoy your games, but you don't need other people, painting is one great way to do it. You can get your miniatures looking really good really easily, and I'm going to show you some tricks and tips to do that today. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in chat. Victoria is modding today on Facebook and on Twitch, so if you have questions, that's a great place to throw them, and I'll check every once in a while and try to answer them for you. I wanted to talk real quick about what I have here in terms of supplies and painting, brushes and that sort of thing, because I think that when you're new to painting miniatures, it'd be really daunting to figure out, like, what do you need and what are the things that you should get. Honestly, the first thing is you need brushes. If you're gonna paint miniatures, it's better to do it with brushes than your fingers. Miniatures are sometimes too small for finger painting. So I've got a little, like, cup of brushes here. But you don't need all of these brushes. This is a lot of brushes. I usually reach for like 3 main brushes. So I usually have a dry brush. This is actually an old eyeshadow brush, and you can get them at like the cosmetic section of pharmacy. This is a cheap brand too. It's this is the e.l.f. contour brush. It is an eyeshadow brush that I have been recommending as a miniature painting dry brush forever. I love this brush. I think it's great, especially if you're starting. It's really soft, and it helps put paint on miniatures. Ooh, I'm bumping my camera. Helps put paint on miniatures in a way that makes the paint look burnished on, or almost airbrushed on. And I mean, that kind of makes sense, because that's what they're promising people who are putting on makeup. You get that airbrush look, that beautiful airbrush look. But instead you're getting it on your miniatures. And this is like a $4 brush. It's super cheap. Dry brushing is a really hard technique, so I don't spend that much money on dry brushes. I also usually try to grab a decent sized base coat brush. That might be a little small. I use that for details as well. But like a bigger brush. This is, again, like a dollar store brush that you can get, and you can just paint with it for your base coats. You need a big, wide brush to reach all those areas. This is a nice brush for that if you've got a big area to paint. Something like this cloak on Kathris here, that's going to be a big area. You can use a bigger brush. And like a smaller detail brush. So something like this. This is really tiny. Something like this works really well in a lot of places too. I'm a fan of those size brushes. Anything smaller, really tiny brushes, like ones that look like they have like 3 hairs on them, they're not as useful, because I find that they're hard to keep their point. They don't stay straight because there's so few bristles to hold the shape. So they can be really challenging to work with, especially if you're starting. So getting like a detail brush that can get you a decent point. The point matters more than the size of the brush, in all honesty. So that's my brush situation. I've also got some palettes here. So this is, and I'll throw that on the screen there. This is a little plastic tray. This actually used to hold chocolates, Ferrero Rocher chocolates that I got for Valentine's Day. And underneath it I put some damp paper towel and a little piece of parchment paper. This is a wet palette. And you can do this on an old sealable sandwich container, like a Tupperware container, or or a plastic tray like this. If it has a lid, then you can close it up if you need to step away for a bit. Your paints will still stay workable, so you're not letting them dry on a palette. And it's useful to have that. In terms of other palettes, I also have a little cup palette here for washes, which is really useful to have. I bought this from the dollar store for like, I don't know, I think it came in a pack of 6 for $1. And it's so useful. You can kind of tell there's still bits of paint that stick on there. It's not going to affect anything, but it's well loved, well used. I am constantly reaching for it when I want to put washes down. And I also have one of these. This is the lid to an old coffee canister. And I tend to recycle stuff like this a lot. This is my dry palette, so if I'm looking to put paint down for dry brushing, this is really useful to have. Old margarine lid containers. You can also use the lip because they have a little lip on them. You can use them as wet palettes as well, but circles are hard to cut for me, so I use them as dry palettes. And that's my setup in terms of brushes and palettes. And the other thing that a lot of people ask about off the start is paint. What brand should I get? What where can I find them? The truth is, local hobby stores are the probably the best source for you to get good quality paints. Shipping paints can be harder because some paints are temperamental with temperature, so shipping can be a little more challenging if you're buying online. You can get it if you you have a local warehouse, or you know that you're in a warmer climate and it's not shipping from a cold climate. You should be fine, but transport can be dicey. So I usually recommend people look locally for their paints first, for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that local paints are usually purchased by the stockist, your retail store, your hobby store, your game store, because they work well in that climate. They're easy to get for that store as well, so it means you can restock on your paints, and it makes it easier than having to try to track that down to match colors later on. So if you know you have a local game store that has a miniature line in stock, they probably have paints, and they can probably supply you with the starting stuff: brushes, primer, and paint. So I'm going to show the paints I've got here to kind of give you an idea of the palette I'm working with. I'm probably not going to use all of these paints, to be perfectly honest, but I like having choices and playing around with my miniatures. What you're seeing today is going to be a live view of what my process looks like when it comes to painting. Oh, one other supply that you should have: paper towel. So I got a whole roll, and I would highly recommend a cup of water to wash your brushes in and to use for thinning your paints down. So I'm gonna get going here. I have colors that I picked based on the reference photos on the box. So we're gonna go with these coppery goldish tones for Donar. We've got these dark blues that are very, very present on Cthulhu, and we've got some browns because they're just useful. I also have some big bottles of white and black paint. Now, if you can't access a hobby store, if you're looking online for hobby paints or hobby quality paints at the art store, look for fluid acrylic paints. You can use those in a pinch. They work really well. A lot of people also paint miniatures with craft paints. I find it a little harder. Sometimes the quality can be more variable. The pigments might not be as fine, and sometimes they have binders in them that are intended to really fill in surface imperfections. So if you're painting them on wood, they actually kind of help smooth that surface out. If you ever use craft paints on like an untreated wood surface, that quality is great on wood. It kind of works against you when you're painting on detailed miniatures where you want to keep the sculpted details, so that can be harder to work with, but it's not impossible. And if that's the only thing stopping you is being able to access paint, and you can get hobby or artist paint or even craft paint at the stores that are available to you, you go for it. Like, there's nothing stopping you, and if they give you the result that you enjoy and are appreciative of and you can be proud of, and that's the most important thing, that's all that really matters. So let's get some paint on some minis here, and I'm going to start by dry brushing. I love dry brushing. Dry brushing is my favorite technique. And I really wanted to start on the dry brushing on Donar here because I think that as a technique, it is a fundamental technique to the miniatures. I'm going to look real quick at some questions to see if anyone has asked any. Let's see here. I'm not seeing any. It doesn't look like there are any right now. That's cool. I'm cool with that. But we, as always, just throw them in chat and I will catch them in. Victoria will send them over my way and we'll keep going. So I'm dry brushing on this black primer. Now, for those of you who are at home and might be thinking, my miniatures are black, I actually spray primed them. You can get primer sprays even at the hardware store. I've used hardware store brands on as primers in a rattle can, like an aerosol can. Use them in places where they are well ventilated, please. Try not to use them in high humidity. They can have a funny finish, and spray be light on it. It's easier to do a couple layers of primer, thin coats as opposed to one thick coat. So right now I'm just pulling out some paint out of my little pot. This is molten bronze from Formula P3, and you don't have to try to match the colors. If you want to get similar results, whatever hobby paints you've got that kind of match this tone. This bronze was something that I kind of was attracted to because it looked a little more coppery, because Donar is a copper dragon, and I find that he looks really yellow in a lot of the art, and I didn't want to go too yellow. I didn't want to pale him out a little bit, so I do want to get that hint of gold in there. So I'm going to actually do 2 layers of dry brushing. So dry brushing is when you load your dry brush. This is not a wet brush. This is just my old eyeshadow brush. I'm going to load it on the paint into my brush. I'm going to rub it off onto my paper towel. And then I'm going to, when it starts fading out significantly, I'm going to just bring the bristles of my brush over the miniature and it will deposit paint. So I'm going to just do that over here on his head. I'm not going to be too worried about his armor yet. I'm going to go over that with a different paint, and I've got other options there. But really, I just want to show you how to do this dry brushing effect because it's a really useful effect. You don't have to just use it on metallics or use it for metallic purposes. It's a great effect to even do on cloaks, on anything really heavily textured. Those are the places where you can really use dry brushing to full effect, and you get this really beautiful finish to it that really does look quite metallic, but also not just like a solid kind of glob of metal. I sometimes find that if I apply too heavy a coat of paint, particularly metallic paint is especially bad for this, it can look like just a blob of paint as opposed to like this beautiful metal sheen. So this is what we're trying to work towards. We're trying to get that beautiful metallic sheen on Donar. And I'm going to work this up a little bit. So I'm going to throw it on his hands. Again, I'm not worried about his armor because I do have a plan for that. I'm going to get onto his flesh, anywhere he's got like his hands exposed, his legs, his tail. I'm just going to dry brush this on. Now let me know in the comments, do you also love Acquisitions Corporate? I'm a huge fan. I'm such a nerd. I've been watching the main PAX shows for years. The folks at Direwolf Digital who co-published Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated with us, they're also huge fans, so I know that when they were developing this game, they really injected a lot of that humor, which I find really, really entertaining. And then when you get to the C-Team streams, again, you just have that same level of humor. You have the same attempts to sway the GM, which I think is just hilarious and entertaining. And it's really useful. Sometimes it's fun to see if you can pull the same tricks on your GM as some of the cast members are from the shows. And I love seeing different perspectives on how these cast members are depicting the elements of you know, their characters, right? When Cthulhu's Draw uses his flight power, it's not just, you know, he's not just flying, it's not Superman. His tentacle from the sky comes down upon him and pulls him up, and he goes kind of limp. This is one of those funny kind of elements that I think are, it's just so much fun and it's so characterful. If you have things that you love, any characters you love, go ahead and share them in the chat. I think that would be really fun to share and call out to. So I'm just going at this. Dry brushing is pretty quick. I'm using a really big brush too, if you haven't noticed. This is one of those things that goes really quickly. If you're painting, if you got big models, big brush will make you paint faster, obviously. And even with those details, you're not losing them with a dry brush the same way you would if you're just taking a big brush and just sloughing the paint on. The dry brush actually, what dry brushing as a technique does is it specifically deposits paint on the raised edges and surfaces of the miniatures. So when you use this technique, it builds in its highlights in there. Now, I like these big soft dry brushes because they help burnish that paint on, as opposed to creating a result that can look chalky or streaky. If you use really, really hard dry brushes, sometimes you get that effect, and sometimes you might want that, but you don't have to have that in every time you paint. So I'm just dry brushing away here, gold on his legs. Again, I'm not worried that I'm getting gold kind of everywhere, this brass tone everywhere, because paint is its own whiteout. It's like Control Z on the model. So I know I'm going to come in and paint other things on top, other paints and other colors on top of the places that I'm getting this brass tone on. So I'm not stressed about it. I'm not going to let it worry me or stress me. I know that those tones are going to get covered up. So I'm going to go really messy, and it's going to go everywhere. It's just part of the process. I'm okay with that. But it's also why I dry brush first, because I know that it's easier for me to apply this everywhere and then cover it up than it is for me to try to dry brush around already painted areas. So this is one of the basic, most fundamental techniques that you really just want to make sure you're doing when it comes to painting miniatures. If you can get on top of your dry brushing, it'll carry you a long, long way. Okay, so I think that's most of the areas. I got his hands, I got his arms, those big old biceps, I got the legs, and I've got the front of the legs, the sides. I'm not going to worry too much about, say, these areas here that are really hard for my brush to reach. So if I turn this model upside down, you can kind of see I didn't quite get in under that pauldron there. I'm not worried about that. And the reason why I'm not worried about that is when this model is standing on the table, first of all, you're not going to see that part. You might as well paint the bottom of the base, and I don't paint the bottoms of my bases. And when you prime in black, it kind of builds in those shadows anyway, so you're kind of cheating, and you don't have to worry about that. So where it'd naturally be darker, because your brush can't reach with your dry brushing, it'll be naturally darker on the model anyways, so you don't have to stress too much about that. Not every little tiny detail that you can see when you hold the miniature 3 inches away from your nose has to be seen, and can be seen when you place this miniature on the tabletop 3, 4, 5 feet away from you. And they look pretty impressive once they do have paint on. So that's my first layer of dry brushing on. Let me see if I can change the focus here real quick so we can get a good look on Donar here. So there we are. Layer 1. Now we're going to go a little bit brighter, a little bit more yellower. I've got this. This is Gehenna Gold from Citadel. I'm going to try it. It's got this really nice red undertone on it that I think will blend really well. It'll still look coppery, but it'll also have this really shiny tone to it. So, and on the palette you can see it's a little bit golder, a little bit brighter. And again, because we're dry brushing it, it subdues the color a little bit, so it's not going to show up as bright as it is on the palette. And we're dry brushing it over black. Again, when you work on top of black, The challenges are that you might have to deal with a little bit of that undertone peeking through, or you have to work a little harder to cover it. I'm using that dark undertone to my advantage as opposed to trying to fight against it. So here we go. Let's do this tone here. I'll put it up on miniature. We're just dry brushing them away here. Let's see. Just throwing that dry brush layer on. Let me check real quick for questions, see if anyone's in chat. Is there anyone I should say hi to? Let's check quickly here. Romhead Tech. Are these the same golds I used on the Power Rangers yesterday? And do I always use that color of primer? Those are good questions from Dan and from Romhead Tech. So these are slightly different golds. I find these golds are a little more red, but that doesn't mean you can't reuse them. Honestly, if you like the way they look and you think they'll work for you, that's fine too. I just have a lot of paint. I have an embarrassing amount of paint. And this is paint I've acquired over the years, and I mean that, years, to try to paint the miniatures I paint. I paint a lot of different miniatures. I love miniature painting. If you don't know, I'm a huge miniature fan. I love painting miniatures, and I've collected a lot of paints over the years. But I'm very particular and selective about the colors I pick. I don't just buy big sets. I find that really overwhelming. And I started initially buying a big old set, 300 paint colors, and I think like at least half of them dried in the pot. It's such a waste. It's often why I caution people against doing that. Don't learn from me, my friends, because I think that that it's hard to get to know your paints. I talked a little bit about it on yesterday's painting stream where I painted some other miniatures from Renegade. They're Power Rangers. I painted up a Goldar. I used brighter golds, more pure golds. These are more bronzy. They are slightly redder to the eye. And so I wanted to get that yellow tone in them because the art has Donar looking very, very yellow. I have a reference here. It looks, he's very, very yellow. But he's a copper Draenborn, so that yellow, you want that red tone to give you that kind of coppery penny look to it. But he's not in the art ever really particularly depicted as truly copper. He's not that brown. And I think it's also because just the style of Penny Arcade's intros and character design, you can't really capture that metallic-y tone. So painting that light, that effect of light, and I talked about this yesterday, we're painting on the illusion of light and dark. It can be more challenging to match that color when you're not doing that in like flat art or 2D art. So I understand completely why he's so yellow. I can get it. But in this miniature, I wanted to capture the metallic nature of his heritage, and I wanted to try to get some of that reddish tone in there. So this is where that second dry brush has left me. Again, you can kind of pick out the musculature in his big old biceps, the musculature in his legs, the details on his head, and then I'm going to throw a wash on him. Again, this tone is a little bit, this is a wash that I used yesterday, actually. It's a slightly brown wash. It is Army Painter Strong Tone. Let's grab it here. And ultimately it's just a brown wash. And this wash will sink into the recesses and the details and let that brown tone kind of come through a little bit, dull down that gold a little bit more, bring it a little bit redder. And as I apply it here, you can kind of see, as I apply it, it kind of sinks into the cracks and crevices and helps the illusion of shadow and kind of pull out those details. So you let the model do the work for you. So I'm just going to apply this and then let it dry. And there we are there. We'll throw it up on the arms here. And the hands. Now, someone asked in the comments, what? Is this the color of primer? I prime everything. I usually prime in either black or white. I'm going to be honest. I prime in black or white because it really depends on the final outcome that I want. But black is a very forgiving color, especially if you're doing a lot of metals. So Donar is wearing heavy armor on top of his like gold or bronzy coppery skin tone here. So with the metallicness of him, I knew I'd be doing a lot of dry brushing and working with a lot of metallics. And because I knew that there are the way that some of this arm is in front of this chest here, it's gonna be a little harder to get a brush in there. Starting with a black shadow or black primer lets you kind of build in your shadows early. Now, if you're painting a really bright color, like a neon model, there are some models that I've painted recently that are very neon. Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid is a super neon kind of range, and all of the Rangers are bright except for like the Black Ranger, which I primed black, but everyone else got primed white, and that's just because with a white base, it really helps pop that base coat of color up. You don't have to try to cover black with your paint. You don't have to do so many layers to build it up to get the opacity you want. And so I'm going to let Donar dry just right here, and he'll dry while I work on the rest now. And so that's really what I'm trying to go for. So I'll pull off my paper towel here so we can start working on my wet palette. We're going to start doing some wet palette painting. Again, this is a really simple wet palette, very light, very cheap, very cheap, pennies. And that's fine. Like, it's okay if your supplies aren't the super most expensive ones. You don't need super expensive supplies to get the job done. What you have, if you're painting miniatures with what you've got, good for you. Good for you. If you get them done and you're happy with them, good for you. Dun is my favorite color of miniature. It's my favorite color to put on miniatures, so good for you. Let's see if there's any other questions real quick before I move on to Cathris here. If kept sealed properly, how long will paints last? Have you ever had a paint dry up and become unusable? Yes. So I've actually had paints from those big sets kind of dry up on me. Like they do eventually over time evaporate. A little bit of moisture just gets out. And I was living in a particularly dry region at that time. That was just a thing that happened. And they were sealed. I hadn't cracked the seal on the lids on them, but they just dried out over time, and it was years. It takes years. If you're using your paints and keeping them in good order, they shouldn't dry out. Like, you can keep them for quite a long time. I check up on my paints. I try to do it when I do my spring cleaning. Honestly, I'll assess all of my paints. I'll open up the pots, figure out, do I need to drop a couple drops of water into them to keep them kind of moist? It's fine. You can do that, and that's easy. Just put a couple drops of water in there, give them a shake. They'll absorb the paint if it's something that you don't really use a lot of. For paints that I use a lot of, particular colors that I use a lot of, they go dry faster because as you draw paint out of the pot, you're opening up your paint, and that's just normal too, especially when you get down to the bottom. There's just more air in your paint pot to begin with. But I've almost always, like, if you actually look, I'll open up this is my Gehenna Gold. Like, let's have a look inside. It's like I've used this paint up. This isn't dried on me. I've scraped down to the bottom of it. And you can, like, if you're painting a decent amount of miniatures, you can get there over time. That took like a year and a half to get to that bottom point. That's not a crazy amount of time for me to use a paint up, and it lasted. I'm still using it. So I've got, this is Denim, Gravedigger Denim from Formula P3. If you don't have this particular color, I looked at the color on the card in terms of my reference card, and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty close match. If you don't have this, it's fine. You can mix it. Don't be afraid to blend your paints to get them to the right place. It's nice to have it on a wet palette because then you can blend them on the palette, and then if you need to use again, you can just close it up. You can then match on the palette as well if you're trying to remix your paint. A little bit of blue, a little bit of white and black grayish mixed into it will get you pretty close to this. And it looks like this color is up on the top part of his cloak. even though he doesn't really have a delineation here. And it's on his face for sure and on his hands. So I'm going to paint his face and his flesh with this color. And then I'm going to add on. And I'm going to go right over his hair. Like, this is going to look real crazy. I'm going to go right over. So when I paint fleshes, faces with hair especially, I'll overpaint the borders of any area I'm painting. If I am painting the sleeve of an arm, so let's say, so let's put this up. I'm painting my arm sleeve. I will paint the flesh color all the way up past where the sleeve starts, and then I'll paint the sleeve color to match that line afterwards on top. I know I'm going to be painting on top of this again. Yes, the hair's black, but I've got black paint. That's fine. I'll undo this messy painting here, but I'm not going to be too fussed if I get paint on the hair. I want to overpaint that border because it's easier to match the line afterwards. Trying to match on a model these two lines of areas, if you're using a brush and you're painting to this border here and you're trying to bring paint up to this border, that line will never look quite right. Whereas if you overpaint this one border and you bring this to match where it belongs, this color comes with it, you'll be able to more easily get a crisp border, and it'll look a lot better, and you won't have to pull your hair out trying and fighting your model as you do it. So I'm going to do his hands. I'll do his hands up. Again, I'm not too fussed about painting his border. His little hands I'm going to paint over past the sleeve. I'm not worried. And I'm just going to get that paint onto him like that. Because I know I've got other colors I'm going to add on and match. And the black is a really easy color because I can come in and clean that up on the hair and on the sleeves at the same time. So it's like I know I'm putting paint on this model where it doesn't belong, but I'm not going to worry about it. It'll look better afterwards. The result will be better for it. And so that looks that. I want to keep this tone of blue, but I want to darken it a little bit and make it more blue on the cloak, because I think that he has this really beautiful dark blue cloak. I'm going to pull this dark blue color. This is like, this is called Exile Blue from Formula P3. And I'm going to put it on my palette, and I'm going to kind of mix them together until I get a place where I'm happy with it. And so with these lids, I'll show you how I open them so I don't get A, paint everywhere, and B, I don't break this little lip here, because sometimes if you notch this off or you break this little back end here, it'd be a bit of a pain. So I'll put my hand on and I'll push with my thumb and pull it open, just like that. So I will grab just a little bit of paint here, put a dot, just a drop on it. We are using such small quantities. That's the other thing. Pea-sized amount, less than the amount of toothpaste you put on your toothbrush. That's what we're looking at in terms of quantity. For like a miniature this size, that's more than enough paint to get them done. I was painting a big model yesterday, but you could still see me, pulling smaller quantities as I was working through the areas. The less you pull the paint out of the pot, the less time it has to be exposed to the air, the less you're going to waste. But even then, it's such small amounts that you don't have to worry about it. Let's do the base coat on his cloak here. So I'm going to take this blue here. I'm going to take a little bit of water. I'm going to take a little bit of this denim-y tone here. I'm going to blend the two of them, and I'm going to get a color that's a little darker than this one, a little lighter than this one, and that's kind of where I want to, that's the color of the cloak I think I'm going to go with. I'm going to start taking that color right onto the fabric of the cloak, and I'm going to paint this whole thing. Let's have a look here. That nice and easy, nice and quick. Take your time. Now, this is pretty thin, so it's beading a little bit. I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to come in with a second coat just to make sure that it's all solid. The color is solid afterwards. I don't mind. Don't stress about having to do a couple layers to get the color you want. Yes, I'm coming up on the little snake on his shoulder. I'm going to paint over that. It'll be fine. Don't worry. Don't stress. Enjoy this process. We're channeling our Bob Ross Zen when we paint miniatures like that. That calm, cool, collected feeling that you get when you get to focus on a single thing When I paint miniatures, it's kind of like, I find that it's kind of like meditating, in that when you get the model up and you're just putting paint on it, it's really easy just to focus on this one little thing in your hands and let the world fall away. I lose time painting miniatures because I can get so focused on painting and putting the paint where I want it and having it look really nice, being really happy with the result. So that's what we're doing here right now. And as I approach his face, I'm going to take a little bit, like an extra second, especially up, there's this cowl here. I might take my little detail brush and get up in there instead of using this big base coat brush to do it. Now, you'll notice that when I paint this model, there's parts of the brush that I'm using. So for fine details, I'll often use the tip of a brush. But for these big wide areas, I'll paint with the side. I'll load my paint up and I'll let the bristles kind of push and splay a little bit to cover more area. When you paint a little more, you'll develop your own techniques and your relationship with your brush, and you'll figure out how you can use the different sides of the brush, kind of like how a pencil, you can write with the tip, or you can shade with the side, and there are all these other ways to make markings with a pencil. You can do the same thing with a brush, and you'll get different effects, and you have different levels of control, and you'll be able to pick out different details with it. Use your brush in different ways and try it. So don't just paint with the tip up against the model. You can go ahead and turn it to the side and let the side carry paint across your miniature. So that base coat looks done. I'm gonna take my little detail brush here, and I'm just gonna take just a little more paint, do that same color, and I'm gonna do his little collar right up here, just like this, just around. Again, I'm not going to stress too much. If I can't reach my brush in there, I don't feel comfortable getting it in there. The nice thing with this particular model is the collar is very similar color to the face, so you can cheat a little bit. It's okay if you add a little extra paint on there, a little bonus paint. We'll come back to it, especially when you paint the facial details. I haven't painted a blue-faced model in quite some time, so we'll have some fun with that. So I'll try to keep this on camera here. So this little detail on the collar, popping collars, thrift straw, popping collars. And yeah, so I primed this miniature black. So the inside of his cloak is black. I'm not going to try to get my brush in there and try to paint that up. I've got a little plan for it to add some visual interest, but honestly, that's where shadow is. Shadow is dark, shadow is black. I'm not going to stress if I can't get too much in there. I might take a little bit, if a little primer didn't get in there, you can take a little black and just touch it up. But I'm going to leave it dark. I'm going to leave it dark in the shadows and let that dry. Now, I've given this a little bit of time to dry. Washes, if you apply them nice and thin, they don't take too much time to dry at all. And you can keep working at them. So when I work in these little batches, 1, 2, instead of one model and then like letting the wash dry and putting it down and waiting, working in a batch lets you kind of work on different things so you don't get too bored. That happens sometimes. But also it lets the washes dry in between, and you want to make sure that when you're working with different layers of paint and you're layering paints up, especially if you're painting over an area that's already had paint on it, you want to make sure the paint has completely dried before you go on to the next paint layer, because it can really mess it up if you don't. It can blend the paints wrong. It can the water can pull pigments out of the paint you're trying to apply into areas you didn't want it to be, and it's just a stressful, awful, highly frustrating situation. So let's see here. He's got straps, he's got armor. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna dry brush his armor a little bit. I'm gonna touch up a little bit of the black first and let that dry, and then I'm gonna go in and touch up the armor while I paint his leather straps. So I got a little bit of black. Again, that's a tiny drop of black out of my bottle here, and I'm gonna touch up the areas that I think I'm gonna dry brush with a little bit of black, just so that I have a nice clean area. I'm gonna try to be really careful around these gold areas that I've already painted, so not to add additional paint on top of them. But if you get a little bit on in a place you don't want it to be, if you thin your paint down with a little bit of water, you're working on a wet palette like this, it's pulling a little bit of moisture out of the wet palette itself, so it's kind of thin. You can take a wet brush and just clean it up. It's okay. It's no big deal. And just move on. And I'm just gonna just touch the paint, add a little bit of black. Right now, what I'm trying to do is take a little bit of that gold away, those bronzy tones. I don't want that under silver armor, so I'm gonna actually just touch that there, and kind of even that tone out a little bit, so it's not as gold underneath. I want that black. I want to work with that black, so I'm gonna blacken up the areas I know I'm gonna try to touch some silver onto, and that's what we're doing right now. We're just kind of creating a nice canvas to put the next metallic paint on, which we're gonna use a slightly smaller brush to dry brush on. Let's see here, this armor here. It'll give you a little more control if you're using a slightly smaller dry brush. I'm also going to use another makeup brush for this. This is a lipstick brush, I think. It's a lip brush or an eyebrow brush. I don't know what this stuff is for. Why do you need so many brushes for your face? But it's a smaller sized brush, but it has that same, like, it's softer and it's just a little bit smaller, so I have to work in smaller areas. I have to load my brush a little more often, but that's okay. I also have a kind of a fluffier brush that's flat. So this is the flat, fluffy brush I've got, as opposed to this round dry brush. Again, a flat brush will help me control where I want the paint more, but I think I'm going to go with, let's see here. If I get a little metallic on this brush here, yeah, I'll go with this as a brush. This is like a lip brush. Again, a small precision brush from As Lip Space. Makeup brush, $3. I know I'm going to dry brush with it. It's going to be a messy affair. It's going to ruin the bristles of my brush over time. So I'm not going to be too stressed if it... Let's have a look here. Where's my paper towel? I'm not going to be too stressed if it isn't going to last. If I see that my bristles are starting to curve or break down, that's kind of the process. So it was a cheap brush. I'm okay with it. But you can still clean these brushes. I clean them with isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to check real quick if there are questions from chat. Let's see here. What would you recommend if we're done and not happy? Okay, that's a really interesting question. So here's my philosophy. And I think it really does come down to philosophy about what done is, right? If you get all the base colors on a model and it's done and you're not happy, there's a couple things that you should look at, right? What is it that you're not happy about, right? It's really easy to be critical of your own work. It's super easy, especially when it comes to miniature painting, where there are so many very talented, very skilled, very experienced painters painting on the internet, posting these amazing photos. It can actually almost be really intimidating. And if you're trying to compare your stuff to that and you're not happy with it, recognize that that's not it. It might be that you might need a little bit of perspective. Maybe take some time away from your miniature and come back at it again when you have a little more skill with your brushes, a little more understanding of how the paint applies. And you can look critically and figure out, hey, I'm not happy with this. The other thing that you can do is we have a group called the Renegade Painters. I see in the corner right there. If you search us on Facebook, they're a really supportive hobby group for painting Renegade miniatures. But we take questions from like all sorts of techniques. You can always ask for help there. There are a lot of hobby communities that you can join. Again, the level of skill is something that you should recognize in your own self, right? Like if you've only been doing something for a week and you're like, this is my first miniature, it doesn't look like that miniature I've seen on the internet from that commission painter. Well, what you're seeing isn't just one miniature. What you're seeing is 15, 16, 17, 20 years of painting miniatures applied to a single model. That's what that skill and technique is. You build it over time. But you can always just take a picture, throw it up in the Renegade Painters group, and like be specific about like what you need help with. Like if you're not happy about the way something is looking, like I don't like the way the armor looks, you can ask for support and advice, and that group is really good about, like, we don't criticize and provide support and critique, I should say, without permission. That's one of the tenets. If you're just posting pictures to be really proud of something, you will get support in that group. If you're looking for technique support, you will get that in that group as well. So yeah, I'm just dry brushing the sword here, putting some metal on there, putting some metal on the shoulder pad here, just dry brushing it on. Again, not gonna be too stressed. I'm not gonna let this whole process stress me out. It's just gonna be a nice light process. And dry brushing is really easy. You can get these colors on pretty quick. And I'm just spending, you'll see me, I'm a little less on the areas where when I'm up against something that's already been painted. And that's kind of what you want. With this silver, it's really nice. Most silvers look really good dry brushed, and you can do it with a really small brush and have something look pretty good in a single dry brush coat. Silver can look kind of dark if you want to go up a level, which I'm going to do with this model as well. I think I'm gonna go up another layer here and brighten that silver up a little bit more as we go. But just dry brushing, it's quick technique. Like the process itself isn't meant to be fiddly or stressful. We're just kind of letting the model do the work for us. Like, that's one thing I do want to emphasize is with nice sculpts like this, if you got detail on there, let the model do the work. If you're finding that things aren't working right, it might not be your technique, it might be the model. I've had models that are a lot more challenging to paint and have been frustrating because the sculpt wasn't doing the work for me, wasn't helping me in any way. I was on my own, I was fighting the sculpt. That doesn't happen with models like these. These are really nice miniatures. They're beefier scale. So the bigger the model, the easier you can add your own details to it, and the less stress you have to be. So I'm gonna also get under in here. I don't have to stress too much about getting a ton of silver, getting perfect on this bottom part, because it's underneath an arm. So I'm not gonna frustrate myself, but I am gonna get a little bit of silver on there so that when you look at it from tabletop, it looks great. It looks painted. There's paint on there. And I'm gonna get his little gauntlet here. And then we'll get his leg plates done up. I think they're called greaves. Feel free to let me know in chat if that's right. But really, this is just really calm. It's supposed to be calm. It's supposed to be easy and unstressful. Let yourself enjoy this process. So this area on the sword here, it's gray on the box, but I think I can do something fancier with it. I think I might bump it up with some gold. And stick it out a little bit from his flesh. Make it pop out from the sword itself, of the hilt here. Give it something a little more fancy. It's perfect. It's probably not going to be seen when it's on the table. It'll look great from the perspective that you're playing with it. It'll look fine. So I'm just getting that paint on there, nice little circles. And when you work with these soft brushes, like, and move in these little circular directions. I like dry brushing in circular directions just because I find that it picks up the paint a little bit better. So whether that's big circles or little circles, if you've got dry brushing where you've got specific details going in a specific direction, dry brushing against the sculpt. So if it's perpendicular, going vertical up and down on details that are perpendicular, that'll help pick up paint on those raised areas better. But when you're working on these bigger, flatter areas, like these little circular motions will help you it'll help you control the tips of the brush, and it'll help you get the paint where you want without overspilling too much, and it'll get you done. So here, around around his tail area, I'm just gonna touch the brush a little bit and wiggle it around a little bit, let the brush do the work for me, and just deposit a little bit of silver. I'm not trying to paint this whole thing silver. I'm gonna come at it again with a brighter silver. It'll pick up, and that's what I'm gonna trust the model to do. Let's see here. Nice and calm. Is there anyone in chat who's working on these miniatures? Have you finished painting your entire miniature set? I'd love to see pictures in the Renegade Painters group. It's a great place to share and grow as a hobbyist, and also like there's some really great reference photos. There's really talented painters in there too, who are like commission painters who are also just very kind people and very generous with advice. And so if you're ever like looking for inspiration, that's a great place to go. I'm gonna throw the last bit of silver here. I almost missed it because his hand was in the way, and then I'll do his little feet. Don't be afraid to turn your models in different directions to get better access to them. You don't always have to paint them right side up. You know, if you haven't been noticing, I'm just this model's going for a bit of a topsy-turvy ride in my hands, and you know, I'm okay with it because it lets me paint the areas I want to paint a little bit easier. I don't have to stress too much about being able to reach, because I can get the right angle to reach those areas. And yeah, so he's coming along, and then I can get his little I guess they're shoes. I don't know. What would you call those? Twitch, tell me what would you describe his foot coverings as? They seem like there was a period of time in fashion where they sold sleeves, just like they called them boleros. They were part of women's fashion. They're just sleeves. It was a tube with two arms. It didn't have like a back or anything. It was just like a bare strip of fabric to attach the two sleeves together. That was a thing. There was a proper name for it. I'm sure there's some high fashion name for the name of toeless, heelless shoes. So let me know in chat what those are. Call it out if you know it, because I would love to know. And then I can use better descriptors while we paint together. How are we doing here? How are we doing for time? We're motoring. This miniature's getting there, and it is not too far off. All right, so I've got silver on his leg coverings, greaves. I got silver on his gauntlets. I've got silver on his curious. Here I got silver not on any of the gold places I'm too worried about. That's a lot of the model is done, which is nice. Like, that's progress right there. So, and then afterwards, when you get these big coats of areas done, you're motoring. So I've got Cathris now. That cloak looks pretty done. Let's bring back my wet palette here. And I'm gonna leave his pants. So his pants are black. His snake is purple. His eyes, his teeth. He's got a crazy look on his thing. He's got some gold detailing on his cloak as well. We can pick that out a little bit later. But there's a little spot. It looks like a little spot that I might have missed on his cloak. So, up by the spider here, I'm gonna get a touch of paint on there. Just right there, up there. I'm gonna paint over a little bit on his snake. That's okay. Snaky will be fine. We'll cover that up with some purple. But I think I would like to tackle his face. Let's tackle his face. Faces can be hard, okay? Eyes can be stressful. Faces can be hard. That's fine. We're gonna do it together. So I'm gonna put some white on the palette. He's got like this crazy look in his eyes. I don't know if he's that trustworthy. I don't know. But we're gonna get that look. We're gonna try to capture that. It's pretty friendly looking. So there is a beard. There's teeth. So it looks like there's teeth. I'm going to just touch this little brush into that mouth area and just give the hint of teeth. I'm not too concerned about it. If I make a mess, that's fine. I can clean it up afterwards with the flesh tone that's on my palette. That looks pretty good. I think so. And we're going to get the eye socket. So here is how I do eyes. It's going to look crazy. We're going to go on a ride together. Let's do this, okay? So here we go. I'm going to paint on these crazy big eye sockets right here. Ooh, that's big. Whew. My goodness. It's okay. Freak out a little bit. You can feel really uncomfortable right now looking at that. That's big. Those are big eye sockets. I've painted basically his whole socket, like half his temple with a little bit of white. Those are really exaggerated eyes. That's fine. It's okay. And we're going to let that dry. We're going to live with that way that looks for a little while. There is a point on every miniature where you might be screaming inside about how it looks. That's kind of a normal thing. That's actually a very normal thing. While I'm waiting for those eyes to dry, let's also throw some white on the eyes of Donar here. Donar's a little bit different because we dry brushed his face. There are not a lot of characters in the world where you might dry brush his face. So this is where we want to be a little bit careful, but I'm just going to take the tip of my brush. This is where knowing the anatomy of your wrist and knowing where you want to use the side or you want to use the tip will work. I'm just going to take the tip of my brush. I'm just going to touch in that eye socket there. Just like that. Little circle. I'm going to do the same on this side. I'm just going to touch. Just like that. And what's nice is he's got big sculpted eye sockets, big sculpted eyeball in there, nice and easy to paint. And then we're gonna let that dry, and we'll come back and do the pupil. He has round pupils. I always thought Dragonborn had slitted eyes. I don't know where that came from, but you know, maybe Cathris has got slightly slitted eyes. That might be a gift from his patron. And I'm going to come in on his eye socket now. That white has had a little bit of time to dry. And it looks dry to me. I'm going to come in and I'm going to draw a line basically from his eyebrow all the way down to his cheekbone. Woo! That's some slitted eyes. Woo! You do the same on the other side here. Eyebrow down to his cheekbone. If you need to turn him around and upside down to get the look, I'm pretty happy with that. I kind of like how shady those eyes are kind of shaping up anyways. That looks pretty shady. That looks kind of crazy. Woo! Eyes! And then we're going to come in with the flesh tone. We're going to clean it up. Kind of the same philosophy as the dry brushing here. We're just going to clean up. So all we're going to do is I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I use so little paint. It dries so quickly. I'm just going to come in on the underside of this eye, and I'm just going to clean it up. I'm going to shrink that eye and paint back his cheek. Hey, there's his cheek again. I'm going to paint the side. Hey, I'm going to delineate his temple a little bit. There's his temple, and there's his brow bone. So I'm painting a little tiny square around his eye, basically. And if I need to fix his nose bridge, I'll touch the side of his nose for the nose bridge. And that's his eye. I can shrink it down just a touch more. I think I'm just gonna shrink it down just a little bit more to give that look that I want. But that looks a little less crazy. So let me change the focus here real quick and get it nice and tight. And there. So this is before, and this is after. And it looks a lot better. We're going to do the same thing on the other side now. I'm going to take this flesh tone that I used, just a little bit here, load it on my brush. I'm going to clean up the bottom side of his cheek. I'm going to turn him upside down because it's a little easier. I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me to paint on the right side of his face. So if I can't reach a certain spot, I'll turn the model upside down, so I am painting on the right side of his face. Just he's upside down. And I'm going to paint this little eye on the bottom until his cheek is back onto his face where it belongs. And I'm going to paint up into his brow bone and then up on the side of his temple. That looks a little better, doesn't it? Nice and easy. And got a sideways glance, very, very Cathris. And I'm going to take the black now, and I'm going to add in his eyebrows. These are sculpted. It's nice to see sculpted eyebrows. Sometimes I freehand them on. That's not always as fun. I can't imagine people who shave their eyebrows off their face and then have to draw them on again. It's very drag queeny. I don't know how I could do that. I would have like the craziest eyebrows every day. But these are painted on, or these are sculpted on, so it's just a matter of following the sculpt and letting the sculpt do the work. Just touching your brush. And he's got eyebrows, the defined eyes. And then we can take that black and fix up his hair while we let that little collar bit dry. And that's pretty much it. We can also do more stuff on his face. We can highlight his face. Now's the time I'm going to take that black. I'm going to touch up his hair a little bit. I might put some streaks through it to give it a little more dimension. But I want to get the black on there first, so I'm not putting streaks of highlights over the blue. Define his hairline a little bit. Make him look nice and dapper again. And let's go this way. If you have questions about faces, I'd love to take them now, because then I can kind of address them in chat. But this is a nice time where you can actually like cheat a little bit on the model. Again, if you make a mistake on the face, it's probably, oops, let me see here. It's probably around the hairline anyways. You can just touch it up with a little bit of flesh tone. Later when that hairline is dry. I'm just gonna do it. Just a little bit there. Can't tell. You can't tell, it's fine. Everything is fine. And take that black and I'm gonna go over his hair over by his other ear and just, go slow. Take your time. Now's the time where you're kind of getting close. You're seeing the end of the light of the tunnel there. And then we'll get his beard on. So this is the fun part where I'm gonna just take a little bit of that black and just paint around and add the beard in just a little bit at a time here. And I'm just adding that paint onto his beard. Not stressful, just stay zen, nice and calm. You can shape it a little bit, you can fix it a little bit. If you're not happy with the way his facial hair looks, you can redo that. I'm not going to be too fussed or mussed about trying to get the flesh in there, because it's such a tiny detail. If you basically paint the beard on and then paint the teeth on top, you can do that too, nice and easy. If you mess up the teeth, that's fine. You just go over it with some white again. You did that already. And I think he looks pretty good. I think he looks pretty dapper. He's looking dapper. Let's get the details of his, let's see, what do we have here? He has boots, but I think they'd be black. Let's get his snake painted up, shall we? I'm gonna do his snake. Oh, I forgot. We've got his clothes. Clothes are black. His clothes are black, so we'll paint them black. So we don't have to get too detailed, but you can if you want to add patterns and freehand craziness. Like, there are a lot of people who are very good at that. I'm not interested as much. I'm more interested in getting my models done, but you can play with it a little bit. We're gonna do a little, just a tiny bit of freehand. It barely counts. We're gonna paint dots under the inside of the coat, capture that like shimmery, like ephemeral quality that he has that's on the front of the box a little bit, that Starry Night kind of effect. But we'll do that after I do a second coat on his cloak. So let's see here. I have this cloak color, and I'm gonna do another mix to try to match my initial cloak color. It's okay if it's a little darker, it's okay if it's a little lighter. It will, the colors will blend together if you're mixing them with water a little bit, and they'll work. They're close enough, right? They're related now because you're using basically the same colors to make that same blend. So it's okay if they're a little bit off. Your eyes won't be able to tell. You're doing this whole thing anyways. You're covering it as a second coat. And this is the second coat that will be like the real quality finish here. And then I'm going to show you some ways to highlight the cloak to make it look like there's a little more light and shadow play, because that's the thing that can be really challenging if you're new to painting. Getting the color blocks on, super easy. But we're going to make a wash, and we're going to wash into the shadows, the creases, the crevices on this cloak. to make them just a touch darker. So there's a little bit of play there, and a little more dimension on the cloak. So the highlights are a little more light, and the shadows are a little shadier. So I'm gonna let that dry. We'll come back to him. But his face is pretty close to Don. His black clothes. Thank goodness he wears really simple clothes. And we'll get back onto Donar. Let's see. It's been about an hour since I started painting. I'm gonna do some stretches. This is really important. If you are new to painting, I'm gonna check for questions, and I'm gonna have a look here and stretch. So stretching when you paint miniatures is really important. You know, I'm gonna give my neck a little bit of a stretch. I'm gonna give my shoulders a little bit of a roll. I'm gonna give my wrists one of these and just like roll them a little bit. Give my fingers a stretch out. I'm gonna look at something that isn't super close to my face, get my eyes kind of focused on something else for a little bit, because you really do want to take care of yourself. A lot of us hobbyists don't take care of our bodies while we paint. We might hunch up, we might tend down. I was painting like this. My shoulders are up, my neck gets all stretched. My posture and my back is really bad. Stretching out, sitting up a little straighter. Those are things that are going to help you. But you want to just take a minute every like hour or so. You know, stretch, get yourself a drink. I'm going to drink some water actually, and take care of yourself while you paint. Oh my. Now, I also keep a bottle of water when I paint, because I have personally washed my brush and my coffee, and that is not a good idea. I do not recommend it to anyone. It happens more than I am proud to admit, and so if you can avoid that, a lidded bottle is probably a little better. It'll help you prevent you from mixing up your paint water cup with your coffee cup. Now we're gonna come in here. Let's finish up Donar's eyes, get his face done, and I'm gonna paint a little dot in the middle of this white, just using the tip of my brush. And there you go. There's the eye. I'll do the same here. It looks like a little bit of the white creased out a little bit. I'm gonna just touch that up around top here. Oh, there we go. Just touched back to a circle shape. And I'm gonna just do a tiny dot on the inside. You don't have to do this. Like, here's the other secret, okay? Chances are nobody is going to see the pupils of your miniature's eyes. So even if you put the white in, that's good enough. So that's, you don't have to stress about it too much, right? Like, I'm gonna give you one tip, is to enjoy the process and enjoy the journey, and you'll see improvement the more miniatures you paint, right? Like, don't keep trying to perfect the same miniature, because that is a dangerous road to go down. So I'm just touching up this eye here, match it up a little bit. There you go. It's got eyes. Woo! All right. Next, I want to do something fancy on his. So we've got the sword hilt, we've got the leather bits, he's got a belt that I want to get on. I do want to dry brush another silver on and get that second silver brightened up on him. So I've got, like, this is a lighter silver. It's called Quicksilver. Ooh, that's a little chunky. I'll give it a shake. I'll try again. Let's see here. Is that a little better? Oh, it's a little better. The thicker paints are also, it's nice to have some of your paints on a little bit of a drier side. Metallic paints, because I dry brush them so much, I kind of like to keep them a little bit on the chunkier side. The paint texture, you'll be able to tell some paints come out of the bottle looking like coffee cream. Those are really hard to dry brush with. Some paints come out of the pot looking like they're sour cream. Those are a lot easier to dry brush with. So I'm just going to take that color and I'm just going to go in and brighten up that silver just a little bit. I'm not even going to focus too much on every piece. I'm just going to focus on the ones in the areas that are like pointed at the sky. So if it's the area that is in the same orientation as Donar's head here, that's what I'm focusing the silver on. I'm pointing it upwards. This area here, I'm not going to do the undersides at all. I'm not going to do the area underneath his arm, because that just seems stressful, and that's not why I'm painting. It's not why you should be painting. Don't stress yourself out. I'm just gonna add some silver onto the sword and brighten it up just a little bit here. Like this. I'm going to give him a gold hilt. And I think that the little bit of gold I'm going to use is going to help contrast his copper tone a little bit. It'll look a little less gold, a little more copper next to a gold. So I have this color gold. It's very yellow gold. It'll make him look a little more copper and a little less gold. So that's really all I'm going to do. I think I'm going to touch his gauntlet a little bit more up here on this side. Just give that a bigger, lighter dry brush. More silver! And this area here up top. It's basically exposed to air and light. That's where I'm going to focus my brush on. And if it's not, like his back is extra silvery, his leggings and his half shoes are a little less silvery. That's all I'm going to do on terms of that. And I'm gonna paint the strapping and his belt, and get that touched up. And I'm gonna put a little bit of gold onto his hilt here, because if I can put that little bit of gold on, that yellow will offset the reddish tone. There we go. The reddish tone of his skin, and he'll look more copper. Sometimes you don't have to. Using the contrasting colors, using different colors can sometimes make a color look more tonally different. So it's like this visual contrast. So I'm going to add a little bit of, this is brass from Formula P3. It actually looks like gold. This actually brings me to a really great point about not necessarily always going with the name of a paint when you pick it. If you're looking for the name of a paint and you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, is this the right color? Don't be influenced by the name of the paint in terms of whether or not you want to use it for a particular purpose. Use your eyes, and trust your eyes more than the name, is really what I want to focus on. I'm going to get this on all the sides. I'm going to pay a little less attention on the bottom side of this sword here. Again, because I know I'm not going to be playing with this model upside down, so getting miniature perfect on this side, I'm really not being especially careful. I'm being a little more careful, a little more fastidious on this top side, because that's where people see. But trust your eyes. This is gold. It's not brass. That looks gold to me. So that is the gold next to the bronzy tones, and he looks a lot more red, and therefore I think he'll look a little more copper as a dragonborn. And then I'm gonna add the silver up onto the handle here as well. So there's the pommel, I guess. My sword anatomy is really bad, so forgive me if I'm getting all of this wrong. The pommel, the hilt, but there you go, and it's got a little bit more detail. I'll take a photo as well. It's hard with the painting lights and the filming lights to really capture metallics, because they just reflect so much light. But I'll post a picture in the Renegade Painters group, as well as the Clank board game group on Facebook. Great community. So you can see what this miniature looks like when it's done. So now that I have all that done up, I think I'm gonna let's paint some leather straps. So let's get some leather. I have a couple browns here, and I pulled two, but I think I'm only gonna use one. One is a redder tone, one is a kind of a peacher tone. This one's called Bloodstone. I wouldn't paint rocks with it. And this one's called Idrian Flesh. Both are P3. I think I would like to use, I think I want to use the Idrian Flesh more. It's a little bit less red, and I think that it'll make Donar there look a little more red. Again, I'm trying to focus on that. This is a color I do use for flesh, but it's also a color I use for leathers and for satchels and that sort of thing, because I think it looks really good for that application. When you find paints, browns especially are very versatile, so don't always rely on the name. But if you find a paint you like, as you grow your collection, like try to use the paints you have before you pick up a new one. You can usually blend a pretty close color to what you're looking for if you have a decent selection already. It helps you get to know your paints. If you're starting out and you're learning what works, what doesn't work, having a good selection of paints and working with them as a limit, like a limited selection, lets you be more creative. I find like those limitations, if you have 40 browns, you're less likely to blend your browns and figure out, okay, how does this work? How can I use it in this application? How can I make it look a little bit different here? What colors can I mix it with to make something else interesting? And if you can do that, you can actually save a little money on buying paint, save a little money because you're not letting paint dry in the pot over time, and you're using the paints you have. So I definitely encourage you to try paints that you wouldn't normally try in different applications. Try washing different colors on top of them. Try different things, because you'd be surprised with the outcome, with how it looks. So there's that brown on him there, and I'll put the straps on afterwards. So I'm just going to paint the straps right on top of the flesh, right there. Again, I'm really focusing on the straps that I can see from when the model is down. So if you're ever in the middle of painting a model, you're getting frustrated, you're not able to reach certain things, put the model down, hold it out arm's length away. Like, look at it from the distance you'd be playing with this miniature, because that's what people are going to see. That's what you want to focus on, and it'll help you prioritize where to spend your time, where to be careful, where to get fancy if you really want to get fancy, as opposed to areas you don't want to stress out about, or areas you don't want to see, I mixed up my brush cup with my water cup just right there, made a whole heck of a lot of noise. But you really want to let yourself have that space and time. Oh, okay, so I missed this little under pauldron, I guess. So I'm gonna put the black on top. I'll let that dry, and then I'll come back and dry brush on top of it. But again, not gonna stress about it. I've got the brown on. I'm gonna let that dry. There's a little rivet sections on his armor that have these little strap bits. So a little strap bit here, I'm gonna paint on. A little strap bit on the front of his half shoes, slippers, hobbitsy shoes. I guess that's what a hobbit would wear if they're like actually like needing shoes, because they don't. The fancy hobbits in the Shire might wear half shoes. That's how they denote it. There we go. And I'll let those browns dry a little bit. I'm gonna come back at there, make sure it's looking good to me. All right, there we go. There is, like, in the pictures there are straps that go underneath his pauldrons and stuff, but it's not there. I don't see it. I'm not gonna stress out about it. Oh, it looks like his half shoes are actually brown. I'm gonna paint them brown. Okay, let's do this. Let's paint them brown. So again, paint is its own whiteout. Yes, I dry brushed them silver. I didn't want them silver anyways. Let's paint them brown. And I'm just gonna add that right there, just like that, on top. And the nice thing about model paints is, when you're working on a wet palette like this, they can cover pretty well. Like, again, this Adrian Flesh is one of the browns I really love using because it's a very opaque color. It covers black very well. I don't have to do too many coats on it for it to look good, and I'm gonna wash this down anyways to make it look more leathery, and that will help the overall look, so it looks a little less flat. So I'm okay with a little bit of that black peeking through. It'll give it a little more texture anyway, so it doesn't have to be like, I don't have to put this thick heavy coat on. I can just paint it on there. Let's have a quick peek for questions real quick. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. Doesn't look like there are any questions so far. That's cool. That's cool. Let me know if you have a favorite color, if you have a favorite thing. Like everyone has, I tend to find if you've been painting for a little while, everyone has a color that makes them happy. Like to paint. There are certain colors that are out there that I know I enjoy painting. This Adrian Flesh is one of the colors that I like putting on models. It makes me happy when I get to do it, which is why I'm painting his shoes brown. But you don't have to at all feel like, you know, it has to be perfect. It has to be exactly the way it is in the picture. I'm not painting him yellow. Yellow is really hard. It's actually one of the harder colors to paint in general as well. It's one of the things that differs, I guess, from working on a 2D surface. Like, they have a harder time doing metallics. You saw how easy and quick metallics on a miniature are. I have a hard time doing yellow. Yellow is so hard. It takes a lot of coats to look smooth and beautiful, and so it can be a bit challenging, especially if you're like new. So I'm just gonna let that dry, let those browns dry. Let's get back to Chris here, hey? I've got that gold out. I think now might be a good time to paint some of that gold detailing. So he's got a little gold brooch on one side, but he's covering up the other one. I'm just gonna touch the tip of my brush into that gold brooch there. Like that, just so. I'm going to touch the tip of my brush onto the chains that are kind of extending from it. I'm giving the illusion of gold here. And I'm just giving, it's kind of like impressionist painting where it's just like, yes, there's a detail here. Yes, it is gold. I'm going to put that on. But I'm not going to like fuss about it. There you go. It's gold. Done. Done. Purple snake? Purple snake time? I think it's purple snake time. Oh. There's some black here that I didn't touch up on his hair, and I do want to make sure I dry that up and give it some chance to dry before I go in there, because I'm going to do some highlights in his hair. He might look like a fall, but you know, he does have those lighter streaks in his hair, and this is something that black hair is really hard to paint to have that dimension. So I'm going to give you some of my own tips. But I am going to paint the purple. I really do want to paint the purple on the snake. Ooh, that thing is a beast. And it looks like it's got white teeth, so we can also use the white that's already on the palette to paint that up. This is Beaten Purple from P3. Open up that thing, and we'll pull some paint out here. Yeah, that's good. So this is a dark purple. Again, it looks good over black. A lot of the paints that I selected for today's stream were picked because I knew they covered black well. And that's something you'll develop in terms of knowledge over time. But like, some paints are just good. You'll notice that these kind of lean towards the metallics, and metallics look really good dry brushed over black. Or they're darker toned. And it means that, you know, maybe one or two coats will cover a black quite well, and it'll look good, and it'll look opaque enough. But really, that's something as you get to know your paints that you'll learn really quickly. I know there are some colors, I've got like a particular kind of taupey color that is just terrible for covering black. It's like a sack tan color, and not great. All right, so let's get now we're gonna paint up this way. So the snake comes around from across his body around his neck. So I'm gonna focus on getting the purple on the front, because the sculpt of this model is such that his hands are kind of in the way. It makes it a little harder. I'm gonna focus on painting that purple on the top side of the model, because that's what people are going to see. There's a bit of snake that is probably going to remain black on the bottom side. That's where shadow is. That's why I'm going to tell myself I'm going to keep painting across and going through and finishing. Finishing is the big thing, right? I'm going to focus to done. Done is my goal. And I can always go back and add more details later. That's the other thing that is something that we really want to remember as we go into painting. Someone asked in Twitch, what happens if you're finished and you're not happy? Maybe you just need to come back to it later. A model, when you think it's done, you can let it be done for a little while and then come back again with more tips, more tricks, more techniques, more experience, and try it again. Like, go at it, add more details, look at your model, see if there's anything else you can do to it to make you happy. Paint something else first, get some perspective, go away and try something different and new, and then come back at the model when you have a little bit of space between you and it, because that is what I find to be the biggest tip that I have. I've had models where I need to look at something else. I've been staring at this model away from my face this close for so long. I see everything wrong with it. I need a break. You just take a break from it. Go paint something else. Go take a walk. Paint some other models that'll make you happy. And then come back to it later and then look at it and evaluate it and figure out, okay, well, this is something that I want to do different, and try that. And you can totally do that. All right, let me adjust the focus here a little bit, and then we can do a wash on his cloak. I'm gonna let that snake. The snake looks like it's already dry, which is, thank goodness. It's so dry here in the winter. So we'll go in and we will zoom out a little bit. There we go. Nice view of his cloak. And we will do a wash. So let's get my little wash cups out. And I'm gonna take this dark blue I already mixed on my palette. I'm gonna take a little bit of that. Just a little bit. I'm gonna put it in my cup. I'm gonna add some water to it from my water cup. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of this black that I added to my palette right here. Take a little bit of that and add that to my cup. Just a little bit like that. Oops, maybe too much. And then I'm going to add some water and thin it down a little bit. And it should be kind of transparent. Ooh, this is very good. All right, perfect. And then I'm going to add a little bit of, let's see here, what do I have? I've got a little bit of dish soap right here. That is dish soap. I put in a little squeezy bottle because I paint with it a lot. This is a hobby supply quantity of dish soap. I filled this bottle, I don't know, a year and a half ago. That's my amount of dish soap. I'm not even going to use all of it. Honestly, we're going to go in there with let's go with a base coat brush. Brush I've been using. Base coat. I'm going to dip the tip of my brush in there. I'm going to stir it into my wash. And why I did that is because the soap breaks the surface tension in the wash, and it helps loosen it so it doesn't cling and bead, but instead flows into the recesses. And I'm going to take that wash, I'm going to wash onto the back of this cloak here, and what it will do is it will soak into the cracks and crevices of the cloak. That's all we're doing. So darkens it a little bit, but it also builds into these little folds. I don't know if you can see that quite well. And when it dries, it'll create little shadows in the cracks. So there's a little bit of dimension in the cloth. You don't have to do a huge amount of shading, shadowing. You don't have to freehand some darker paints in the cracks and crevices. You can just give it a wash, let it dry, look at it, evaluate it, see if it dried the way you wanted it, and let it go. So I'm going to apply that up at the top here where there's lots of creases. And yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll let that go, and we'll let that dry. All right, let's get back over to my pal Donar. So I've got the brown on him. He's a pretty simple character. I mean, if we want to spend time and we want to paint up he's got a little bit of blue detailing around his collars, up at the base hilt here. I think that's it. It looks like that. Teal will pop against the the blue here, but against the gold here. But that blue will look really good next to the bronze tones, if we want to. But I really want to get a wash on the leather first. So let's get my strong tone. We'll put it in the cup. Again, like 2 drops. You don't need a lot of this stuff. If you're really worried and concerned about like wastage, don't be. If things dry on your palette because you're done it. You're working with such small quantities, 1 or 2 drops at a time. You can always add more to your palette. It's really hard to put it back in the bottle, especially with these squeezy tube or squeeze bottle washes. So I'm just putting the wash onto the leather bits, just like this, like that right here. I'm not stressing, not too muffed about it. I can come in later and put in that same gold I put on the hilt, on the little buckles on his shoes here. And I'm going to take that same gold and I'm going to do his belt buckle too, I think. But I'm just going to put this wash on the belt and on the shoes. I'm not gonna really focus too much on these legs here. I already put a wash on that, so not too. I'll just touch my brush to him. I don't have to try to meet it and only keep the wash on that part because I washed that flesh with the same color. So it's okay if a little extra layer goes on there, it won't be detectable. And we'll just keep the wash nice and thin. It warms it up and it gives it a little more leathery appearance, and we'll just let that dry. As always let it dry. Let's see here, what else do we have that I can get some paint on while that wash is drying? I think we're gonna do that. Let's do that blue. So I can mix some of the existing blue I have from Cthulhu over here and make that lighter blue color. Or I can like pull a bottle, but I think I want to try to make that color. I told you to try to blend your own colors. I should do the same, right? I'm not going to try to add more paints. And I find that when you're painting teams, having little bits of the other character's color on other models within that squad or team really helps unify it, even if they're like little touches. They don't have to be huge amounts. You don't want them, like especially this ragtag team. But if you're using consistent golds across them and you're using like these little touches of blue here, I'm going to take that dark blue I had. I pulled a little bit of white, and I'm going to mix that up there and see how that looks. That looks pretty nice. That looks pretty nice. I'm going to take that little bit and I'm going to, let's see, touch the collar up here. It's just a collar. So here we go. Let's do this collar up here. Let's not stress out too much about it. If you can't do this, don't feel like you have to paint it. It's okay. No one will notice. I promise. But if you want to try it, go ahead. Like this is your model. Do what makes you happy on it. Do what makes you feel like that model is complete. And I'm just going to paint that little bit on right there. Get that little detail onto the model. Not stressing too much about it. And I think I'm okay with it. I'm going to put a little bit of wash on it. I'm going to take that dark blue wash and try to unify it a little bit more there. And it looks like the hilt of his sword might have that same blue. I'm not really happy with this blue, you guys. I don't think I'm happy with it. It looks really baby bluey on the model, and I'm not loving it. Not loving it. So I'm going to take that dark blue again. I'm going to go over it. Let's see if it's dry first. I'm going to give it a little bit of a dry, and make sure it's dry. And then I'm going to come back at it with a little bit of that darker blue on top and just touch that there. Oh yeah, that's much better. I'm really happy with that. That looks better. And that collar is painted. There we go. So sometimes there's a detail on there that might be harder to paint or might be more challenging or isn't quite sculpted perfectly just because of the way that the sculpt is. You have to paint a little bit of detail or you have to exaggerate it. Cthulhu's hairline, or when I paint eyebrows on miniatures I don't have it sculpted, that's kind of That's the thing that happens sometimes. If there's a detail on the reference photo that you're using that you really want to capture, but it's not sculpted on, give yourself the freedom. Just, go slow. Try it out. Do what makes you happy. That's the most important part. Don't hesitate to just leave it off because it's not truly sculpted. Because you can still get it on there and have that little detail in there. But I think that blue, it's there. It's subtle, but it's there. So I'm gonna leave that while the rest of that wash dries. It looks like that wash is coming up pretty quick. This wash here is got some soap in it, so the glycerin in the soap makes it so it dries a little bit slower, so I'm gonna be really careful when I handle it. But you can already see the shadows on that cloak. It doesn't look as flat. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for shade and shadow. We're painting the illusion of light onto this miniature. The snake has teeth. The snake has teeth, you guys. This snake is not making me happy. I'm not gonna lie. This snake is creeping me out. But we will soldier on and we're gonna paint the teeth. And I'm just gonna take the tip of my brush and just like exaggerate it. I'm just gonna touch and let the bristles make contact with the model, with the paint on it, and just pull away. That way I'm not like pushing paint in between where the teeth are, and that therefore obscuring the detail of the teeth. So that's it. So the wash is coming off the model now. Now I'm gonna do it on the other side here. And I'm gonna I'm turning this model all sorts of ways. And I'm fine with that. He might be going on a ride, but I'm fine with it. And we'll put the teeth on, just like that. Now you can put a wash in there too, if you have a particular kind of wash that you like for teeth. Like there's soft tone that you could totally check out. But I'm just trying to get the impression of teeth in there because they're so tiny. They're such tiny details. You don't need to stress about them. All right, there you go. Teeth done. Pink eye, pink flame. Whew. And we're looking great for time. I think I'm going to finish. These guys are going to look pretty good. Pink teeth. Pink. Or pink eyes. And you got a pink flame in there. And then I'm going to try to get a little bit of detail into Cathrissa's cloak here. So we're just going to do little dots on the eyes. I see them sculpted. Creepily, very creepily sculpted. And I'm just going to put them on because they're there. 1, 2. I'm not going to worry about the eyes on the other side next to Cathrissa's head because there's a shadow there. But pink eyes are on there, and then we'll get some pink onto the flame. Now this flame is a little crazy looking, but that's okay. That's okay. It's okay. I'm going to... Let's do this. Now we can always fix the flesh color. If you see that it bleeds onto the fingers a little bit, that's fine. We're gonna let that kind of, it has a little bit of glow anyways. And even if the flames are licking out past his fingers and we're painting it like that, that's fine. Like those are the little details. Again, it's kind of like seeing the artist's hand in the work, right? Like we're not machines. And so having those little personal touches, something a machine or something trying to replicate exactly, these are your personal flourishes, and how you choose to paint this flame is one example of that personal flourish. So I'm going to put I should have given you the color. This is Murderous Magenta out of the P3 line. And it's just a really, really pink tone. Super pink. So there we go. Now I'm going to let that flame dry. This cloak is coming along real quick. I want to get this gold detailing onto Donar real quick. So while that pink flame dries, I'm probably going to do a second coat on it. I'm going to touch his belt buckle with a little bit of gold here. Just put some gold on that belt buckle so it's got a little bit of visual interest. I'm going to throw a little bit of gold onto these buckles here. Just little lines. Again, if you can't get your tip quite perfectly in there, that's fine. It's pretty shadowed, so. But those are the little details on the shoe. Let's see, is there anything else I want to get done on here before we finish? I'm just going to touch up that inside, that hilt there. Make me happy. And that looks pretty good. And let's see here. That magenta is not going to dry quite yet, but I do have a little trick up my sleeve. So I'm going to paint some stars on the inside by painting dots in white and with a little bit of this. This is interference paint. This is an artist paint. Fluid acrylic is the kind of artist paint you're looking for any sort of miniature application. They sell it in a reasonable range of colors, and then you can blend them together. But this stuff has this really interesting quality. So I'm going to put a drop of it out. I'm going to mix a little bit of it with some white. And I'm going to dot it into the cloak here. Just little dots. Just dots, just little stars. And I'm just going to add them. It's random. This is something that is a detail for me. A lot of people will not see it from tabletop. I'm okay with that. This is something that makes me happy. But it captures a little bit of that detailing that's on the front of the box for the CT. Those little stars. And that's where it's visible. So when you see it in there, they look like that. You've got those little bits of speckled starness, sparkliness, or the abyss of space. I don't know. I'm not sure how Therese would see it. But those little dots make me happy. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be exact. They don't have to be anything. They can just be what you want. This is, if you're looking to try something interesting, that's what I did. And it's under there. So if it's not perfect, that's fine, but it'll catch the eye just a little bit when the model is on the table. Like this. And I'm going to take, it looks like that magenta's dry. I'm going to do another coat of it on top and brighten it up a little bit. And then I'm going to take that same interference paint and I'm going to paint flecks through my fire with it. Yeah. We'll see how that looks. This interference paint has this like sparkly effect when it's shown with light. And so it plays with light really interestingly. It's not glittery per se, but it is interesting. So while we're waiting for that magenta to dry, I'm going to do some details on his hair here. And so I'm going to blend a little bit of black with a little bit of white to make like a grayish tone. And we're looking for just a dark gray. It's visibly different from the black, but it's not super crazy. And I'm just going to paint little lines in his hair, just like this. Just little lines. And it'll give his hair just a little bit more dimension, I think. And again, this is the kind of details that make me happy. You don't have to do it. But it makes me feel like, this is he's made a pact. It's a little dark. It's okay if he's got a little bit of grayish in his hair, or that could be the light. Who knows? Who knows? And I'm going to do the same details a little bit on his beard, a little bit, just to capture a little attention to his face, so it's not just flat black. And I think that looks pretty good. Now this is a very simple paint job. Same with one on Dinar. Very simple. We only had like 2 hours together, you guys, and I spent a lot of time squawking at you. Oh, I forgot to do Dinar's shoulder pad. Oh my gosh, we still have time. I've got time. Let's make this happen, hey? And really, it's just about, you don't have to go as fast as I. Again, what you're seeing on screen right now is, it's not just, me painting for 2 hours and getting all this stuff done. It's me having all the experience I have, all the time I've done, knowing my paints, knowing my techniques, knowing what works for me. There we go. That's a little nicer. And just having a very defined understanding of what I know I can ask my paints to do, and doing it. no one is expecting you, and I hope you don't hold yourself to the same place where you're just like, in 2 hours I should be able to bang something out like that. Like, again, these are very simple paint jobs. I'm not doing any fancy techniques or anything, specifically because I want to show you that these things can look good with very simple techniques, very simple strategies of approach, and they'll look great on the table. So I'm going to take this interference paint. So I finished up the shoulder pad there. I'm just going to paint I'm going to water it down a little bit because it has this really weird effect. And I'm just going to paint this through, and I'm not sure if the camera is catching it, but it has this like bluish sheen. This is interference blue. This is, I guess, the company's Golden. They make a lot of like products. You can find them at the art store. And I'm just going to paint that color on. And I'm just going to turn it a little bit, and you can see how it interacts with the light a little bit. It has this like bluish sheen to it, so it helps unify with all the other blue on the model here. And yeah, I think we're good to call it. We're pretty close to done. Now this is, again, base coated, very simple techniques, simple approaches, but I'm very confident that you can probably do this as well, if not better than me, taking your time, going at it slowly, and matching all of this. You have all the techniques. They're not complicated. They're not simple. I really do hope you join us in the Renegade Painters group. You join in the Clank, the board game Facebook group. Join us there. Share photos if you've painted your miniatures. I'm really excited. I'm going to check for one last time for any questions. Let's see here. Are there any questions? It doesn't appear like there are. I think I'm gonna wait just a little bit because there's a little bit of a lag. But do join us in the Renegade Painters group. I really do hope you jump in with us. It is a really supportive community. It is a really positive community. There are a lot of people who are very experienced in miniature painting who are in there. I'm gonna throw some photos of these miniatures in there. And this is a speed paint for me, but I think you could do this. I think you can absolutely do this. I do hope you try. I do hope you get some paint on your miniatures. Find some time to invest in your hobby and get a little more enjoyment out of your games. You've got them already. You might as well make them your own. Yeah, I don't see any questions on Twitch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to, if you're seeing this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification button. Set it to always so that you know when we post new videos. If you are on Facebook with us, be sure to like us on Facebook and join our groups. There are a lot of there's a Clank related group with a lot of members. There's a Renegade Painters group with a lot of supportive members, and be sure to follow us on our other social media and let us know. If you're on Twitch, hit that follow button. We're streaming. We're still streaming from home, so I really do hope you join us. We've got a lot of really entertaining content, and we're trying to share the fun of gaming with you. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm gonna find my mouse and sign off. Have a wonderful day, and don't forget to play your game.